All right, let's jump right into this. Today, we're exploring a deeply fascinating psychological sci-fi manuscript that completely shatters the boundaries of reality. We're looking at a document titled 2071, written by an anonymous author who just calls himself David. And let me tell you, this isn't just a story. It's a manifesto, it's a puzzle, and it's a profound exploration of human connection, all wrapped up in this super high-stakes psychological drama. The core premise alone is absolutely captivating. You have a mute journalist locked in a psychiatric ward who claims he's actually invented a telepathic system that will entirely replace human language. But to prove it, he has to outwit his doctor and save the woman he loves.
Just listen to this jarring opening line. David, our narrator, claims point blank to have rendered all human language totally obsolete. He basically argues that humanity, like all of us, we've gotten lazy. We've reduced our brilliant minds to cheap shortcuts, memes, and this really rigid binary yes or no way of thinking. And because of that massive degradation, he says his own will to speak was completely destroyed. So he killed language, deliberately, to pave the way for something entirely new.
So you gotta ask yourself, what actually happens when a mute patient tries to rewrite the laws of the universe from inside a psych ward? That's the central tension of our explainer today. We're tracking a protagonist who is physically trapped in literally the most restrictive environment imaginable, a hospital bed totally stripped of his rights. But mentally, the guy is completely boundless. He's rewriting the very physics of existence right from inside his own mind.
Let's start with Act 1, the silence, the blank Etch-a-Sketch.
Think about the stark contrast between the two worlds David is living in simultaneously. Over on one side, you have clinical reality. This is Dr. Emery's world. It's the psych ward, it's medications, and it's the incredibly sterile, rigid, yes or no binary system of traditional psychiatry. But then, on the other side, you have quantum reality. This is the vast, vibrant, non-linear architecture of David's own mind. It's a place where telepathy is real, labels absolutely do not apply, and the entire universe operates on limitless possibilities.
To really get why he retreats into his mind like this, we have to look at his vulnerable starting point. David wakes up in the hospital as a literal blank Etch-a-Sketch. He's totally mute. When doctors ask him questions, his tongue literally fails to work. He arrived by ambulance with absolutely nothing. No shoes, no belt, not even his own memory is fully intact. I mean, he can clearly picture the face of his daughter, Iris, right after she was born, but he can't even remember her phone number to give her a call. He's been entirely stripped of his identity and left at the total mercy of the medical system.
But here's the thing. David refuses to be a victim. Instead, he views traditional psychiatry as a dead profession, and he decides to fight back by weaponizing the word. He realizes that language, even with all its flaws, can still be a devastating weapon if it's used with precision. He figures out how to completely control his doctor using just one single ambiguous concept.
And that weapon is the word suicide. David writes this specific word into the manuscript he's composing in his head. He knows for a fact that by introducing this concept, but purposely leaving his actual intent vague and undefined, he creates a brilliant legal and professional trap. Dr. Emery is now forced to read every single word David writes until he can officially confirm or deny David's intentions. Through just one word, a mute patient completely captures the forced attention of his captor.
But David's whole motivation shifts gears when he encounters Grace, who he refers to in the text as Person B. She's another patient in the ward, and she's under 24-hour suicide watch. David claims that in a single passing glance, he read her entire life. It sparks what he calls a profound blind love. All of a sudden, just outwitting the doctor isn't enough anymore. He sees that Grace has lost her purpose, and he decides right then and there that he has to save her from breaking under the weight of her own despair. Now, to save her, he needs to build a new universe. But it has to be built on one unbreakable rule: consent. The absolute #1 rule of David's telepathic reality is that it must be completely consensual. It's a binding agreement that doesn't need any physical paper once two people align on it. His telepathic system can't force anyone. It only works through mutual, unforced agreement. He absolutely refuses to take away Grace's free will, even if it means saving her life. Which leads us right into Act 2, the invention, the 4 books. David retreats into his mind and methodically destroys, then recreates reality step by step. Book 1 tackles reality, basically the boring, predictable world of classical physics and hard facts. When that fails to explain his telepathy, he moves on to Book 2, God. Here, he theoretically challenges religion, actually placing himself in the role of the creator to show the world its mistakes. Book 3 explores spirituality to try and convince both atheists and the spiritual alike. And finally, Book 4, which is hilariously titled Larry, Curly, and Moe, represents the chaotic, final realization of his completely open mind. Within this mental framework, we hit what is arguably the most intense sci-fi concept in the manuscript, the quantum crossroads. David posits that classical computers, and really human society by extension, run on an incredibly lazy binary of yes or no. But a quantum computer? That operates on the why. He claims that if quantum computing ever reaches exactly 256 qubits, it will literally have the power to answer the why of the entire universe. It would solve all sciences in seconds.
So, what is the ultimate question David decides to pose to this hypothetical omnipotent quantum machine? He asks, does God exist?
And the machine's answer won't be yes or no. The answer will be maybe, a straight-up 50-50 probability. And this brilliantly illustrates the collapse of human certainty. I mean, think about our own brains for a second. We rely so heavily on mental shortcuts every single day, and we're so intensely trained on yes or no logic that we literally cannot handle a multidimensional maybe. David believes that encountering this ultimate ambiguity will fundamentally destroy the binary world as we know it, forcing humanity to evolve into his nonlinear telepathic universe. It's a genuinely staggering thought.
But wait, how does all this actually help Grace? Well, David discovers what he calls a loophole in time. Remember his very first rule, consent? He realizes he can't just time travel and change Grace's past without violating her free will. So instead, he navigates the physics of the mind. He travels back to change his own choices, carefully manipulating his own timeline so that their two universes align perfectly. He essentially plants a seed of doubt in her mind, but she still has to actively choose to let it grow.
Moving into the final stretch. Act 3, the proof, the final confrontation.
At this point, David's frustration with the psychiatric system just absolutely boils over. Apparently, Dr. Emery told David to hone his trade as a writer. Well, David aggressively rejects this, throwing it right back in the doctor's face. He demands that the doctors step up to his level, challenging him to actually figure out a true, honest diagnosis by the end of the manuscript, instead of just hiding behind lazy, ambiguous medical labels. And then David provides this incredibly mocking table. He tells Dr. Emery that the math of psychology is super simple. Every single time the doctor encounters an ambiguous word in David's document, he should just add 1. He tells him to keep a running tally until the end of the document, at which point David promises to provide a formula that supposedly solves the entire field of psychology. It's such a deeply cynical move. He's literally reducing the doctor's entire life's work to a meaningless tally of confusing words. Ultimately, David cancels his future appointments in the ward. He sets up one final power play, demanding a meeting out in a local park. He gives the doctor a strict ultimatum. He's only returning to the hospital on his rules. To prove that his mind is entirely in control of his physical body, he dictates this intense 9-day biological reset. 3 days on a keto diet, 3 days of pure fasting, and then 3 days of whatever the hospital dietitian recommends. For David, true control of the body requires zero prep time, and this is his ultimate proof of dominance over the whole clinical system.
The manuscript then fast-forwards us all the way to the year 2071. We learn that David's document, his anonymous proof, has actually been released to the world at large. He and Grace decided to take their chances and share their invention, leaving it entirely up to humanity to decide whether they want to believe in it.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question. As you sit back and digest the rules of David's universe, you really have to ask yourself, did we just witness a genuine sci-fi evolution of human consciousness and telepathy? Or are we just reading the deeply moving consensual delusion of a traumatized man? A man trying to survive the crushing despair of a psych ward by inventing a beautiful universe where he and the woman he loves can finally be free.